I'll never forget the first time I realized my house was about to turn into a battleground. It had been a brutal night. I'd just finished a grueling 12-hour overnight shift at the hospital where I work as a floor nurse. I was running on fumes, with only one thing on my mind: sinking into my couch for a few precious hours of sleep. I was totally wiped out, mentally drained, physically aching. A dull pain had started in my lower back and crept all the way up to my shoulders. But then, as I turned onto my quiet suburban street that morning, something caught my eye and made me slam the brakes. There was a strange silver SUV parked smack in the middle of my driveway. My driveway. At first, I figured maybe it was some kind of emergency. Maybe someone had car trouble and just needed a place to pull over. I looked around. No note. No neighbor standing nearby looking sheepish. Nothing. Just that SUV, sitting there like it belonged. Annoyed but trying to stay calm, I found a tight spot on the street and squeezed my car in. No easy feat, since street parking in our neighborhood is basically gold. I climbed out, grabbed a pen and scrap of paper from my bag, and wrote a quick, polite note. "Hi, this is private property. Please don't park here again. Thanks." I slid the note under the windshield wiper, then headed inside. My heart was pounding a little, probably from the surprise more than anything else. My dad, who's in his late 70s and has a hard time getting around, was staying with me for a few days. He needs the driveway to get in and out safely. The whole point of keeping that space clear was so I could help him without a hassle. I dropped onto the couch, trying to shake it off. I told myself, it's probably just a fluke. But man, if only I'd known. That SUV was just the beginning of something way bigger, and way more twisted. Hey, real quick, before we dive deeper into this wild ride, I've got a small favor to ask. If you could take a second to hit that like button and subscribe, it'd really help our channel grow, and help us keep bringing you crazy true stories like this one. Also, we love knowing where everyone's watching from. Drop a comment below and tell us what city you're in. It's always awesome seeing how far this community spreads. I woke up a few hours later, still groggy from my shift, and peeked out the window. The SUV was still there. Still in my driveway. And my note? Crumpled into a ball and tossed into the bushes nearby. That's when the irritation turned into real anger. I had to leave soon for an appointment with my dad's doctor, and I needed the driveway clear so I could help him out with his cane. I didn't have time to play games. So I wrote a second note. This time, no more Mr. Nice Guy. This is private property. Do not park here. Final warning. I slapped it on the windshield, thinking surely, this time, they'll get the message. But of course life doesn't always play fair, does it? The next morning, bright and early, I stepped outside to grab a few things from the store, and there it was again. That same SUV, parked like it owned the place. My final warning? Torn up into tiny pieces, littering my driveway. I just stood there, blood boiling, heart racing. I was so done playing nice. My dad needed easy access to the door, and I couldn't understand how someone could be so inconsiderate. Who was this person? A clueless guest of a neighbor? Or just some random jerk who thought my driveway was up for grabs? Either way, I'd had enough. The next day, I finally worked up the nerve to go confront whoever owned that SUV. My first chance came early in the morning. I was outside, staring down the car, wondering if I could have it towed legally without triggering some kind of neighborhood drama. That's when I saw her. A figure stepped out of the house across the street. Karen. She was the brand new president of our HOA, and she looked the part: platinum blonde angled bob, crisp white blouse, and a resting face that could curdle milk. I'd heard plenty of gossip from the neighbors about the woman across the street. Rumors about how she was super uptight, always nitpicking people for the tiniest things. Stuff like sending out violation letters because someone's grass was half an inch too tall. But up until now, I'd never actually spoken to her. Never had a reason to. That all changed real fast. She came marching straight toward me, eyes locked on mine, like lasers. "What are you doing near my car?" she barked, her voice cutting through the calm morning air. My eyebrows shot up. Her car? I suddenly realized she was the one who'd been parking in my driveway. Trying to keep my cool, I asked, "Wait, that SUV is yours?" I kept my voice polite, even though I was fuming inside. She crossed her arms, letting a smug little smirk spread across her face. "Yeah, the street parking around here is ridiculous," she said, like that explained everything. "And I have important HOA business to take care of, so I use your driveway sometimes. It's not like you're using it all the time." My jaw clenched. I tried not to lose it. "You're parking on my private property without asking," I said. "And you've ignored the notes I left. I have an elderly father, he needs easy access to the house." She gave a sarcastic little snort. "Look, I'm the HOA president. I know the rules. And you don't own the street," she said, jabbing her finger toward my driveway. "Besides, if it was really that big a deal, you would have come talk to me sooner." I could feel my face getting hot. "I did try to talk," I said through gritted teeth. "With the notes you threw away." "Karen?" "Yep, I'll call her Karen," shrugged and climbed into her SUV. "If you want me to stop," she said over her shoulder, "you'll need to do more than scribble on scrap paper." Then she slammed her door shut and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching. So this was our HOA president. Grit. My frustration morphed into full-blown rage. For a few days after that, she actually stayed away. I started to think maybe, just maybe, she got the message. Maybe she realized I wasn't bluffing. My dad was relieved too. No more risky shuffles to and from the street. I started to feel like things might actually settle down. But of course, peace didn't last. Less than a week later, I came home from yet another exhausting shift at the hospital, and there it was. Perseverance. This time, it wasn't just in the driveway. She'd parked so aggressively, she completely blocked the ramp I'd installed for my dad's walker. He was inside, thank God. But if we'd needed to leave in a hurry, for a medical emergency or anything, we'd have been screwed. My heart was hammering as I stomped across the street. I banged on her door so hard I felt it in my bones. The porch light flicked on. The door creaked open, and Karen's face appeared, looking like she couldn't believe I dared to bother her again. "You blocked the ramp I built for my dad," I said, my voice tight. "He can't even get out of the house." She rolled her eyes. Like I'd just told her she left a sock in my yard or something. "Your father can walk around it," she said flatly. "Honestly, you're blowing this way out of proportion." I clenched my fists and counted to 3 in my head. "He's elderly, Karen. He uses a walker. This isn't some tiny inconvenience, it's dangerous." "Car." She let out the biggest, most dramatic sigh I've ever heard, then said, "Fine. But just so you know, if you keep harassing me, I can make your life very difficult. I am the HOA president." And then, just like that, she slammed the door in my face. A few minutes later, she did move the SUV. But I stood there in my driveway, staring at the ugly oil stains it had left behind. My stomach turned at the thought of her threat. The next morning, my dad's nurse came by for her usual visit. We were sitting in the living room, going over his medications, when I heard a loud thud outside. I rushed to the window, heart skipping a beat. There she was. Karen. She was back. And this time, she was messing with something near our mailbox. I slipped outside, feeling that mix of confusion and dread crawl up my spine. She had stuck a bright pink notice to the side of the mailbox, big, bold letters at the top. HOA violation. Apparently, she was accusing me of storing hazardous materials in the driveway. Hazardous materials. It took me a second to realize. She meant the oil stains her own car had left behind. "You can't fine me for something you caused." I snapped, yanking the notice off the box. "This is insane." Karen didn't even flinch. "Watch me," she said, folding her arms. "As president, I can issue citations for any violation of neighborhood standards. An oily driveway? That's against the rules." That definitely counted as a violation. And honestly, I could barely believe her nerve. "That leak came from your car," I started to say. But Melissa cut me off with this dismissive little wave, like I was a child interrupting her. "It's your property," she said flatly. "You're responsible for keeping it clean. End of story. Fix it by next week, or you'll be fined." My hands were shaking. My dad's nurse stepped outside just then, curious about the commotion, and asked if everything was okay. Melissa shot her the coldest glare I've ever seen, then just turned and walked off without saying a word. It was humiliating. I felt trapped, furious, and honestly worried about how all this stress might affect my dad. He didn't need this kind of tension around him. I decided right then, I had to do something. No more warnings. No more back and forth. Melissa was escalating, and I needed to protect my home and my family. That afternoon, still fuming, I called an old college friend of mine. He's an attorney now, working at a local firm. Property disputes and drama? Totally his wheelhouse. I told him the whole story, from start to finish. When I got to the part about Melissa posting a violation notice for her own oil leak, he actually coughed and went, "You've got to be kidding me. This is clear trespassing," Dan said. "She has zero legal right to park in your driveway. HOA president or not, it's private property. If she does it again, you're fully within your rights to have her towed." I lowered my voice, still a little unsure. "But she keeps saying she is the HOA president, and she could hit me with fines or violations or something." Dan actually laughed. "Listen," he said, "HOAs can't override state property laws. And if she's threatening you or harassing you, you need to keep track of everything. Take pictures, write down dates, save any notes. With proof, a tow company will have no problem removing her vehicle." That phone call lit a fire in me. I'd tried to be patient. I'd left polite notes. I'd even had a face-to-face with her. Nothing worked. My dad's safety was on the line. So the next time her SUV showed up in my driveway, I was ready. And I didn't have to wait long. Just a few days later, I got back from a quick grocery run, and there it was, Melissa's silver SUV, sitting in my driveway like it paid rent. It was gleaming in the sun, like it owned the place. That afternoon, we were expecting a home health aide to visit my dad. And now? The walkway was completely blocked. That was it. I'd already saved the number of a local tow company in my phone. My hand didn't even hesitate. I snapped a few clear photos, her SUV right there, blocking access, and dialed. "Hi," I said, calm and steady. "I've got an unauthorized vehicle on my driveway. Here's the address." They showed up faster than I expected. And let me tell you, watching that tow truck back in and hook Melissa's precious SUV to its rig, it was weirdly therapeutic. My heart was pounding like crazy, half from adrenaline, half from the sweet, sweet satisfaction. This is the right thing, I told myself. She left me no choice. 20 minutes later, the SUV was gone. I stood by the window, half expecting her to come storming out of her house, but nothing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could actually breathe. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, that little dose of public embarrassment would finally shut this down. But later that night, boom boom boom, a furious pounding on the front door nearly made me spill my drink. I didn't even need to look, I already knew who it was. I opened the door and there stood Melissa. Face bright red, eyes wild, phone clutched in her hand like it was a weapon. "You towed my car," she shrieked, practically shaking. "You had no right." I leaned casually against the doorframe, keeping my voice cool. "Yeah. You parked in my driveway. Again." Her chest rose and fell as she jabbed a trembling finger at me. "That was illegal. I had important HOA documents in there. You can't just steal my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Illegal? Melissa, you were trespassing. And I warned you. Repeatedly." Her nostrils flared as she shouted, "I am the HOA president. I was on official business. You had no right to do that." I let out a slow breath and looked her dead in the eye. "Being the HOA president doesn't give you VIP parking in my driveway. Newsflash, HOA rules don't beat state property laws." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her brain was clearly scrambling for some kind of comeback. Melissa stood there, silent for a second, and then, like she just had the best idea of her life, she whipped out her phone. "Fine," she snapped, jabbing at the screen. "I'm calling the police. You're harassing me." Her hands were shaking as she punched in the number. I just shrugged. "Go ahead. I'll wait." 15 tense minutes later, 2 officers pulled up out front. And Melissa? She ran toward them like they were her personal bodyguards. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried, full of drama. He had my car towed for no reason. This is theft. The taller one, Officer Reynolds, held up a hand. Ma'am, slow down. What exactly happened? Melissa pointed at me like I was the devil himself. He took my car. I parked here because there's never any street parking, and I have important HOA responsibilities. He's been harassing me. Reynolds turned to me. Sir, did you have the vehicle towed? I nodded and pulled up the photos I'd taken, clear shots of her SUV sitting in my driveway, blocking the path, multiple times. He barely glanced at Melissa before saying, Ma'am, a driveway is private property. He had every legal right to have your vehicle removed. Her face turned pale, then twisted into something angry and unhinged. No, that's not right. I'm the HOA president. The second officer, Martinez, looked exhausted. He rubbed his temples. Ma'am, being HOA president doesn't give you permission to park on someone else's private property. If you want your car back, you'll have to pay the towing fee. Melissa let out the kind of gasp you'd expect in a soap opera. Pay? You expect me to pay for this? Reynolds crossed his arms. That's how towing works. Her hands were shaking with rage. This is a conspiracy. You're taking his side. Martinez narrowed his eyes. Ma'am, you called us. If you keep making false reports, we can charge you for that. Melissa's breath hitched. You could tell she realized she'd lost. But she wasn't done trying. She turned back to Reynolds, eyes wild. So that's it? You're just gonna let him get away with this? He should be arrested. What kind of cops are you? Do you even know who I am? I run this entire neighborhood. If I say someone's breaking the rules, you listen. Reynolds raised an eyebrow and said, calm as ever, Ma'am, the law doesn't care who you are. It's his driveway, his property, and his rights. Maybe you should start reading the laws instead of trying to make them up. Melissa's expression turned downright scary. Her fists clenched like she was about to throw something. Then she spun around and glared at me like she wanted to burn a hole through my skull. You'll pay for this, she hissed. This isn't over. I smirked and said, oh, I'm sure it's not. With that, she stormed off. The officers gave me this little knowing nod before heading back to their cruiser. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Finally, a driveway without Melissa. For about a week, it actually stayed that way. She kept her distance. No more parking invasions. Though whenever we happened to be outside at the same time, she'd throw the nastiest looks my way, like I'd personally ruined her life. I let it go. I had more important things to focus on. My dad was preparing for surgery, and I was doing my best to juggle my hospital shifts, which were draining, physically, emotionally, all of it. The last thing I needed was another battle with Melissa. But drama has a way of sniffing you out, especially when the other person thrives on it. One quiet Saturday morning, I woke up with a plan to take Dad to his follow-up appointment. Just a routine check. I pulled open the curtains and my jaw dropped. Not only was Melissa's SUV parked in my driveway again, but now she had a second car parked behind it, completely blocked in. The audacity. I rushed outside, furious, and also kind of panicked. Dad's appointment was in 2 hours. We didn't have time for another one of her nonsense stunts. The second car was a small blue sedan, probably a friend or relative of hers. But seriously, why did Melissa act like my driveway was some kind of community parking garage? My dad came to the door, leaning on his walker. Everything okay, son? I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. She's at it again, Dad. Melissa parked 2 cars this time. He let out a tired sigh, shaking his head. That woman's got no respect. I wrapped a steadying arm around him. Don't worry. I've got this. I'll handle it, I told my dad. I marched across the street and knocked on Melissa's door. Nothing. I called out, even asked one of the neighbors if they'd seen her. Nobody had. She was either hiding from me or genuinely not home. Either way, I couldn't wait around. Dad needed a clear path to the car, and she'd blocked him in with 2 vehicles this time. Dan's advice echoed in my mind. You can legally tow any unauthorized vehicle on your property. So, I picked up the phone and called the tow company again. I explained the situation and said, This time, it's 2 cars. The guy on the other end chuckled, clearly remembering me from the last call. No problem, he said. We'll send 2 trucks right away. Sure enough, within half an hour, both tow trucks pulled up. The drivers took one look at the scene and shook their heads. Man, one of them said, she really thinks this is her parking lot, huh? First, they hooked up Melissa's SUV. Then the little sedan. As they worked, I felt a familiar wave of nerves creep in. I knew Melissa was going to lose it, but that didn't matter anymore. She'd shown zero respect for my property, for my dad's health, for basic boundaries. Enough was enough. Watching both vehicles get hauled off was almost surreal. My adrenaline was through the roof, and I was shaking a little, but deep down, I felt totally justified. She could twist it however she wanted. I had the law on my side. And, right on cue, the meltdown came 2 hours later. I was in the living room helping Dad with his physical therapy exercises when I heard tires screech to a stop outside. I looked out the window, and there she was, Melissa, storming up my driveway like a woman possessed, her face twisted in rage, cell phone pressed to her ear. I stepped out onto the porch, already bracing for impact. "Where's my car?" she screamed, her voice cracking as she jabbed a finger at me like I was the devil. "Both of your cars were towed," I said calmly. "Parking in my driveway is trespassing. I'm done playing nice." She stared at me like I'd just slapped her. How dare you?" she shrieked. "I'm the HOA president. This is harassment. I'm calling the cops." She started pacing in frantic little circles, ranting into her phone about how she was being targeted. Spit actually flew from her mouth as she yelled for an officer to come immediately. Inside, my dad peeked through the door, shaking his head. He couldn't believe what he was seeing either. And then, like clockwork, Reynolds and Martinez showed up again. Same officers. Same tired expressions. Melissa ran at them, waving her arms like a warning flag. "He's had my cars towed twice. This has to be illegal. Arrest him." Reynolds sighed and looked over at me. "You got pictures again?" I held up my phone. "Yep. Both cars. On my driveway. No permission. Blocking us in, just like last time." He nodded, then turned back to Melissa. "Ma'am, like we explained before, he's legally allowed to have unauthorized vehicles removed from his private property." Melissa let out this strangled half-sob, half-growl of frustration. "But I'm the HOA president." "That still doesn't give you the right to park wherever you want," Officer Martinez said, cool as ever. And that broke her. She started hyperventilating, shouting that I was ruining her life. That she was going to bury me in HOA violations. That I'd regret this for the rest of my days. Meanwhile, the officers just looked like they wanted to finish the paperwork and get back in their cruiser. I didn't say much. I just stood there, arms folded, letting her words hit the air and fall flat. She was so worked up, she could barely form sentences anymore. And when she realized both of her cars were now sitting in the impound lot, racking up storage fees, she absolutely lost it. I'd never seen someone so furious. She was shaking, face beet red, eyes glassy with tears, not the sad kind, the rage kind. There was no getting out of it. She'd have to pay for both the tow and storage fees herself. And there was no shortcut, no loophole, no, I'm the HOA president card that could fix it. The officers told her with all the professionalism they could muster that no crime had been committed. Then they left. Melissa stayed behind, in full meltdown mode. She turned to me, her glare sharp as a blade. "I hope you're happy," she hissed, stepping closer, ignoring the fact that my dad was standing right there in the doorway. "You've made an enemy you can't handle." I didn't say a word. My heart was pounding, every muscle in my body tense. Part of me, just a small part, felt bad for Melissa. I mean, I could only imagine how embarrassed she must have been in that moment. But mostly, I just felt exhausted. All I'd done was protect my property and make sure my dad could safely get to and from the house. That's it. Her phone rang. Probably the impound lot calling to let her know how much it was going to cost to get her cars back. She glanced at the screen, muttering a string of curses under her breath. Then she looked up at me. Our eyes met. In hers, I saw pure rage. But underneath all that fury there was something else, too. She knew she couldn't win. She knew she had no control over this anymore. She opened her mouth like she was about to fire off one last jab, but then stopped herself, clenched her jaw, turned around without saying another word, and with her shoulders tense and shaking, she stormed off my property. I watched her walk away, that familiar angry scowl etched on her face, until she vanished down the sidewalk. Only then did I let out a shaky breath and step back inside. My dad was waiting just past the door. He rested a hand on my shoulder, gentle, reassuring. His eyes searched my face, full of concern. But I just shook my head. Didn't say anything. I leaned against the wall, letting the leftover adrenaline slowly drain out of my system. That meltdown? It was just as dramatic as I figured it would be. And while it wasn't the last time Melissa and I ever clashed, it was the turning point. She'd made her move. I'd made mine. But this time, the law had my back. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with me through this wild ride. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep sharing crazy real-life experiences like this one. And hey, what would you have done in my shoes? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your take on all this.